Next, we will hear from Professor Jonathan Montgomery, chair of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, which released a report earlier this year, which we're aware of, considering the ethical, legal, and social issues that arise from the use of novel neurotechnologies. He is professor of healthcare law at University College London, is chair both of the Health Research Authority and of the Advisory Committee on Clinical Excellence Awards. Professor Montgomery sits on the Scientific Steering Committee of Brain Banks UK and is a member of the Committee on the Ethical Aspects of Pandemic Influenza. He previously chaired the Human Genetics Commission, chaired the UK Clinical Research Collaboration Working Group on a Strategy for Brain Tissue Banking, and sat on the Organ Donation Task Force for its work on presumed consent. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present something of the Nuffield Council's report on novel neurotechnologies, but in particular what we've been doing since the launch of the report.
Great.
I should say any difficult questions I'll invite Nick Rose to answer, because he was a member of the working party that did it. And I should also say that one of the things that emerges from this, and I think it's already emerged from the discussions we've heard this morning, is the overlap between different pieces of work. And one of the things that the Nuffield Council has as a non-government body is a chance to shape its own agenda a bit. And we have some overlapping projects. The Novel Neurotechnology Project built a little bit on work we published in 2012 on emerging biotechnologies. We're doing some work at the moment on big data, which picks up some of the connections, and I'll say a little bit later on about some work we're doing on research culture, because it touches on some of the applications of the Novel Neurotechnology report, and also something we've heard this morning. So our report, I think, took a slightly shorter time frame than some things we've been talking about this morning, and that it was trying to assess what we should be doing now on things that were reasonably close or in actual use. So we were looking at deep brain stimulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, brain-computer interfaces, and a few other technologies that are there. We identified a number of underlying tensions which you'll be familiar with, linked to what might be special about the brain, both in terms of the need to understand it better and also the anxieties that we have about how we might address it. And we picked out a number of key interests around safety. We were doing things to brains that we needed to be competent about, particularly in relation to implantation, and we'll come back to some recommendations of that later on. We picked up some of the ways in which it problematizes autonomy, both in terms of impact on self-conception, but also on the fact that much of this research has been done on people whose autonomy in some ways is problematic. We picked up issues around privacy, as we've discussed earlier. We picked up some issues around equity in terms of differential access, but also the potential for stigmatization about working forward. And we picked up some issues about trust, which we'll come back to. Our framework for looking at it was built around three virtues around inventiveness, humility, and responsibility, which we thought would help us balance the need against the fact that we knew a lot less than we would like to know about what was going on. Particularly in terms of recommendations, focusing on what it meant to move this forward in a responsible way. So our report picks up some of the responsible research and innovation messages, which Europe is quite big on at the moment, to which Nick's already spoken about. So we identified a series of recommendations, a few of which I'll pick out. One is about regulatory structures, and in the European framework, the structures for regulating medical devices are very different from the structures for regulating pharmaceutical interventions. And broadly, our report argues that the devices are disproportionately light in terms of regulation, that system, and the pharmaceuticals are disproportionately heavy. And we make various recommendations about how we might get something that is both effective while being proportionate, but most importantly in the context of the virtue of responsibility, identifying how we could do this in a context that gathers information and enables us to learn from it. Not dissimilar, I think, to the things we heard earlier on about responsible science. One of the weaknesses of the regulatory framework we have for medical devices is it's a bit too easy to get things into market with very little data on effectiveness, particularly where there are existing devices that are said to do the same thing, although I think experience over here and also in Europe shows that there's a bit of mission creep on what counts as the same thing that raises concerns. So we've argued that we should aim to bring at least all devices that are neurostimulation devices under the model for medical regulation, not so far as the pharmaceutical one, but the model that's used for neural stem therapies. We've also identified a series of challenges in doing that smoothly. In particularly the UK system, which we were mainly addressing, there's an awful lot of overlap of regulators, and one of the recommendations in the report was to address that overlap. It's been partially addressed, partly by stimulation from the Nuffield Council report and partly also by parliamentarians on our Science and Technology Committee, seeking the regulators to set out a map which will help people find their way through the system. So if I put my Health Research Authority hat on, which is one of those regulators, we've worked with colleagues in order to try and be clear that we don't have overlap. It doesn't stop the system being complex, and there's still a set of challenges which Nuffield is pursuing in terms of opening that up. We also identified a number of areas that were problematic. Our approach to neurostem cell therapies in the UK had been to set up a specialist committee, the Gene Therapy Advisory Committee, which had met on a different basis from what you would call IRBs and led to a very slow approval process. That's recently been brought into line with the more normal timelines and seems to at least be processing applications more quickly. We've identified particular problems around the attempt to use new bespoke therapies for individuals without it being within a clear research structure, which is permitted by our legal system, but in order to contribute to responsible innovation in the area, we need to collect the data much better on what is learnt from those things, so that if it isn't a trial as such, it remains research that we can learn from. And we identify particular problems around ethical guidance in relation to sham neurosurgery, and I'll come back to that very shortly. So what we've done is we've addressed a series of challenges, and I just want to pick up four of them that I'll say a couple of minutes altogether about. The hype issue, which you've picked up, I think it plays out slightly differently in our media than what I've heard this morning. So the media hype that we've picked up, our examples and reports: stem cells can rescue the memory from Alzheimer's disease, claim scientists; coma victim able to speak again after pioneering magnetic field therapy; how a zap to the brain could bring out the genius in you; morality is modified in the lab; paralyzed man's mind is read. So I think we've got a slightly different set of hype issues. But what was interesting from analysis done is that almost all those reports seem to come pretty much straight out of the press releases from the scientists. So the question around scientists getting out there played out slightly differently. And one of the ways we've addressed that is that we have a project we've set up with the various learned societies to look at research culture and how it's shaped, because we think the hyperbole comes at least as much from our researchers' culture as it comes from pressures from outside. And we think that's largely related to funding regimes for research. So we're all of us working together, but coordinated by the Council, trying to address that. We're also engaged in some of the attempts to get better earlier thinking about ethical issues. We're just starting a bit of work with something called Fun Kids Radio, and I'm just looking at one of the scripts as we were talking this morning, which includes a little bit about brain turbo tablets, and that's getting youngsters in schools talking about it. And if you looked at our work at, I think, what you would call high school around philosophy and religious studies, is bread and butter the bioethical issues, and we contribute learning materials that are available for that. Other bits of specific follow-up from recommendations. We held a round table earlier this month to bring together neurosurgeons, patient groups and clinicians used to running clinical registries, and we understand that the British Society for Stereotactic and Functional Neurosurgery, I hope I pronounced that right, is setting up a deep brain stimulation registry. So it's an early step in collecting this information so that we can learn from it. The regulation of devices is under consideration at European level. We've had an opportunity to meet with the MRHA, which is our Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, to feed into that the thoughts from the Nuffield report. But the mysteries of European legislation are manifold. I think today we're going to learn something about what they're doing with clinical trials. It may be some time, I think, before we learn about devices. We've been working with the Health Research Authority. I have to be careful here because I can't do both bits, so it's colleagues in both of them around the guidance on the use of sham surgery as controls. And their current view, we have something in the Health Research Authority called the National Research Ethics Advisors Panel, which supports what you would call IRBs. They've had a look at the report. At the moment, their response is that they think that existing guidance, which is around the proportionality between the public interest in conducting the trials, the need to use sham surgery as part of the methodology, and the full consent of patients is probably enough. At the Council, we think that doesn't really clarify what might be different about sham surgery and neurosurgery, so there are continuing discussions there. Thank you very much.
Jonathan, thank you.